Oh man, you look so hard! Excuse me? I just don't want to fight you. I feel like it would be too difficult. You need to learn to phrase things better. Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, in Elden Ring there are a number of things to draw people in and keep them playing. One of them is the weapons. Oh, I love the weapons, but arguably the most notable part of From Software games in general are the bosses. The designs, their fights, and of course their unparalleled challenge. There are plenty of bosses that simply require you to work out how their base mechanics work, find a secret weapon that is super strong against them, or find an item that sort of trivializes them. But for everyone like that, you can just overpower with pure strategy. There are at least a couple that require you to overcome them through combat skill. No easy ways out, just roll at the right times and use your openings to get an attack or two in, and lower your enemy's health bar to 0 while keeping your own health above 0 itself. There is something beautiful about the simplicity of this type of difficulty, and it is a lot of what leads to the satisfaction of defeating a boss in Elden Ring, especially some of the harder ones. When you know the only thing stopping you is your ability to memorize patterns, get timings correctly, and positioning yourself in the right place, winning a difficult fight is almost like learning a dance routine, like a Guitar Hero song with extra steps. Take away all the visual fluff and the hardest boss fights in the game are just rhythm and timing combined with positioning. And so today I'm here to both celebrate the challenge and take out some of my frustration against them with my own personal list of the top 10 hardest bosses in all of Elden Ring. This is mostly based on my own experiences, but I have of course been sort of plugged into the community for the last 3 months, and so I can't deny some influence from just seeing what you all have complained about yourselves. Without further ado then, let's begin with number 10.
What about breakfast?
We've already had it.
We've had one, yes. What about second breakfast?
Crucible Knight Duo. Sometimes it feels like Elden Ring was modular rather than set. Like you spend some time in Limgrave, find all the enemies that you despise the absolute most, and then from there on the game says, okay, how can I take that enemy and make it worse? Make it more plentiful and make you want to cry. And maybe I did cry multiple times, especially against this absolute hellhole of a fight. If you thought one Crucible Knight was bad, then try to fight 2 at the same time. Thank you, Crucible Knight Ordovis, for this wonderful experience. They work together very well, and they have slightly different movesets to mess with the timings that you're reacting to, and they are at the end of a chariot dungeon as if the fight itself wasn't frustrating enough. Every attack that a Crucible Knight does that is normally hard to avoid is doubly so in this room, and the fact that they are super resistant to damage only means that it will be a longer time before you're fighting only one enemy than it is in most double boss fights. This one is simply relentless. Number 9.
If I was an astronaut, I'd be floating in midair.
Starscourge Radahn. I love this boss so much. Just from a design and lore standpoint, he is genuinely my favorite character in the entire game, and it isn't even close. No one compares. I mean, he literally uses consistent, constant gravity magic 100% of the time just so he can ride his sickly, scrawny little horse rather than needing to replace him, because Leonard, his horse, is just too dear to him in his heart. Even in his scarlet, rot-addled, barely functional brain state, he cares enough about his horse to output this kind of energy just all the time. The fight, though, is incredible. He was nerfed a bit in a recent patch, but even still he is a great challenge of a fight. You can summon a million NPCs back to back to fight against him for you and never hit him yourself if you really want. And even then he will target you a fair amount, and his attacks are very potent and wide-reaching. And if you choose to fight him without summons, which I personally think every Elden Ring player should try at some point, he is just an absolutely incredible fight. Of course, the difficulty ramps up tenfold as he is originally balanced around you having all of the summons, but he is absolutely a completable fight even done this way, and way more satisfying too. Every movement becomes more important, and in the second phase his pile of boulders that he slings through the air is just as deadly as all hell, no matter how you do the fight. Number 8.
Sid says jump, you say how high. Hey, comprende?
Godfrey, First Elden Lord. God, free yourself some time to do this fight again if you ever get the chance, because it is an absolute gem. A lot of people power through it just through trial and error, lots of rolling and slowly chipping through the health bar, but this boss, as the second last boss of the game, tries to test you on a very specific mechanic new to Elden Ring: jumping. Nearly half of his moveset only affects the floor, the stomp that fires rocks out from below, and every single stomp that causes an earthquake around the whole arena. Yes, you can roll these if your timing is right, but when you roll, you are stuck in the animation of the roll until the end of the roll. And against Godfrey, and in his second phase's Horah as well, if you are only rolling, you'll find it pretty hard to get in hits and do your own damage. This is where jumping comes in. There are plenty of bosses and enemies in the game that have attacks that you can dodge by jumping over them, but Godfrey uses these more often than anyone else. Jump the stomp, do a plunge attack. Jump the stomp, do a plunge attack. It's an incredible rhythm. Just do it over and over. It takes a long time to get the exact timings of it right, but it's really cool once you do. In the second phase, he can absolutely be nasty as well when he starts dunking you into the floor with a grab on almost every attack, which, until you get used to the dodge timings of, can be absolutely anger-inducing as well.
Number 7.
The bloody idiot bloody shot me! I'm all bloody!
Mohg, Lord of Blood.
This one is very interesting and somewhat hard to place because you can fight him if you really want to as your first boss in the game, technically. But as far as the rune reward and location goes, he is absolutely intended to be one of the last that you go against in the entire thing. But you can technically just walk to the Liurnia region around the side of Stormveil Castle without ever killing a boss, talk to White Mask Vare and do his very short questline there, which can be done without having to murder anything major, and then you've got access to the Palace of Blood. The fight itself there then is terrifying. Blood flames spurting out everywhere, which is of course both fire damage and blood buildup. Moves to counter when you are close to him, moves to counter when you are far away from him, and when you get him to half health, he unleashes the super move calling out massive pulses of bleed from above, known as the Curse of Blood. You can counteract this with a special wondrous physic mixture that you can get in the Altus Plateau, making this fight a significant amount easier. But if you either don't have that, or have wandered into the fight before you've even gotten to that point, you simply need to chug health potions during this part or die. There is no other solution.
Number 6.
Well, no, it takes like 78 years to hang a dragon to death.
Lich Dragon Fortisax.
What I would personally list as the second hardest dragon boss in the game, this guy combines the complexity of dragon lightning with the ever-looming fear of death. Literally death, as his lightning is infused with death blight. And when the bar fills up, you will literally just instantly die. No counter to that. This one isn't even hard to explain why I think it is hard. It is very self-explanatory. Lots of big area of effect attacks that apply death blight. That sentence itself sounds shivers down my spine. I don't think this one even needs further elaboration, so I won't.
Number 5.
Dragonlord. Dragonlord Spike.
Dragonlord Placidusax.
Where the last dragon was especially hard due to the status that he wields, Placidusax is hard because he's just freaking hard. I mean, I tremble at the concept of fighting this guy at full power, as when we meet him, he is missing multiple heads and a part of his tail, looking just incredibly beat up, and yet, once you engage in combat, it becomes immediately noticeable how terrifying he actually is. Every step of the way, this fight is tough, but once you reach the second phase, it is a whole other level. 2 words: teleporting dragon. If you thought the other ancient dragons were hard, just try finding one that can disappear and then reform behind you.
Number 4.
A wiener dog werewolf, of course! A textbook wereweenie.
Malekith, the Black Blade.
While a number of the bosses on this list have been optional, these last few are all main story progression bosses except for one, who is still a main boss anyways, just not required to reach the ending of the game itself. Malekith himself is quite the cool fight, but also a bit of a nasty wall. In the first phase, he uses loads of beast incantations, which are actually, in my opinion, the far more manageable attacks to work around than his dagger strikes. The way that he hunches over means that you have to get up nice and close to hit him with a melee weapon, but his reaction to you being up close is loads and loads of close-range dagger swings where he can hit all of the angles you don't want him to be able to reach. While manageable, it makes his phase harder than most first phases of the bosses out there. The second phase, though, sees a total shift. Some people will find it easier, and some people will find it way harder. He starts to use Destined Death, which causes your health to burn away like crazy, as well as using a giant sword instead of this little tiny dagger, which means that you can actually take advantage of his size and run right up under his chest so he can't attack you with the sword any longer. However, in this phase, he is incredibly acrobatic, so you won't be able to get away with this for very long. If you're not a melee user, though, this fight is understandably just harder, as now he has projectiles that travel even faster and deal way more damage, along with all the extra mobility to boot.
Number 3. Ratagon / Elden Beast.
In any other game, these would be two bosses, and in a lot of ways they are two bosses, but seeing as the game makes you fight them back to back and counts it as one prolonged encounter, I am counting it as a single entry on this list. The Ratagon phase of the fight is challenging, but not overly so, just timings and positionings that we are relatively used to from other fights. No crazy new concepts to learn, but it's just the appetizer to the main course that is the Elden Beast, and a lot of the difficulty of this comes from the fact that to do Elden Beast, you have to kill Ratagon again every single time. As for Elden Beast itself, regardless of the moveset, part of what makes this so hard, especially as a final boss, is that it just completely invalidates nearly half of the builds in the game. Being essentially immune to holy damage and completely 100% immune to poison, scarlet rot, bleed, frostbite, and sleep, it is a boss that made a great deal of players have to just completely rethink their approach to combat in Elden Ring, and for many, a total change of build in order to defeat it. The way that I see it, any boss that forces you to change your build is undeniably difficult, and that is before even digging into the moveset properly. It uses an advanced version of the Elden Stars incantation, which just chases you down with a heat-seeking projectile that fires out smaller projectiles along the way, and if you let this thing hit you, it will just straight up kill you. But while you are dodging it, the boss will still do other attacks that you have to dodge simultaneously with dodging the Elden Stars, and it's just absolutely nasty to deal with in any way. It's pretty much impossible to take 0 damage while this is going on. On top of this, there is also the ring creating attack, which puts a circular field around you on the ground that you have to jump out before it closes, and this is a fun mechanic, but also one that is unlike any other fight, and so it adds a specific layer of difficulty to learning this fight properly. In any other game, this would easily be the hardest boss, but this is Elden Ring, so I still have 2 above it.
Number 2.
Now there's 2 of them!
Godskin Duo.
I genuinely feel pain even bringing up this fight. After all, if it wasn't for sleep as a status, I think a good portion of the community as a whole would still be stuck on this boss fight, not progressing forwards. The Godskin enemies aren't unique, they are elsewhere in the game. A few apostles and a couple of nobles, each of them having their own moveset and both of them having code that makes them try and use a projectile every single time that you try to use an item or drink a flask, which is, extremely frustrating to work around even with just one of them in the fight. But now, in this encounter, there are 2. On first glance, this is already terrifying for obvious reasons, but then as you push through the fight, you realize something even worse. You can't even really just focus down one of them and then fight the other one solo, because the bar at the bottom of the screen is not the health bar of the 2 enemies combined. It is the overall health bar of the encounter, and they respawn. You kill one, and it'll be back a few seconds later. This fight is meant to be 2 bosses through and through, no working around it. And it is honestly one of the most challenging experiences that I have had in a video game when you fight them normally. But it can be cheesed quite easily if you build the sleep status, as both of these enemies can be slept, and when you do so, you can just sort of destroy them like it's nothing.
Number 1.
Release a deadly virus into the water supply. Good.
Melania, Blade of Mikola.
You know how I said that the last one was probably one of the most challenging things I've done in a video game? I would say Melania is probably number 1. And Josh, Hollow, and I were all in a World Top 500 Mythic Rating Guild in World of Warcraft, which I realize not only outs us all as massive nerds, but also will only actually be understood by a certain number of you. But put simply, we've done some really difficult stuff in our time playing video games, and this one, at least for me personally, is right the hell up there. Melania's moveset is incredibly difficult to master in the first place. She is more reactive than proactive, forcing you to take the offensive against her so she can take advantage of your animations. She dodges nearly all projectiles. She closes gaps like it's nothing. Her overall damage is just intensely high when she does hit, and as if it wasn't enough already, every time that she does hit something, she regains health. So you can't just take it slow and safe and use the occasional opening to trade damage. Even using a summon is honestly sort of dangerous because they just take hits and let her heal. And if she hits you, the damage that you just did is invalidated entirely if you try to trade. Past that, her actual combos are difficult, sometimes being fast enough that rolling one attack just makes you get hit by the next one up. And of course, there is the big notable moment of Waterfowl Dance, where she jumps into the air, then chases you with a ton of slashes faster than you could possibly escape them. It is definitely feasible to dodge every part of this attack if you recognize it fast enough and start sprinting the opposite direction, but even if you know the exact theory of how to avoid it, it is still very hard to put into practice and actually avoid every hit. This is a fight that you can learn, but even when you learn it perfectly, perfectly. It is still a massive challenge to overcome, even with the knowledge, and that is something very special. All of this, however, doesn't even include the whole second phase of the fight. This was just the first. Once you empty her health bar entirely, she will turn into the Goddess of Rot. Yes, you literally pushed her into becoming a god in order to kill you, and now she has a bunch of Scarlet Rot applying AoE attacks that are difficult to dodge, on top of most of her regular moveset from phase 1. Oh, and she can fly now, so there's that. All in all, it is a challenge that could keep you occupied for almost as long as you spent killing every other major boss in the game. It really is that tough, and I wouldn't blame anyone for spending a while here and then deciding, you know what, maybe this optional boss can stay optional, live and let live, you know? And that's it, everyone. My own personal list of the top 10 hardest bosses in Elden Ring. Yeah, you might disagree with me, but I'm not a computer tallying up statistical difficulty metrics. I'm just someone who has played the game an unreasonable amount over the last 3 months and has formed opinions about the game and the enemies within. What are your thoughts on this list? What would you add or replace? Like if you like the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.